left, left, right, left, right, left.
तू जिंदा है तू जिंदगी की जीत में यकीन कर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है तू जिंदगी की जीत में यकीन कर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है। तू जिंदगी की जीत में यकीन कर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है। ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे गुजर गुजर गए 1000 दिन। ये गम के और 4 दिन, सितम के और 4 दिन, ये दिन भी जाएंगे गुजर गुजर गए 1000 दिन।
कभी तो होगी इस चमन पे भी बहार की नजर,
अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग तो उतार ला जमीन पर। तू जिंदा है तू जिंदगी की जीत में यकीन कर, अगर कहीं है स्वर्ग।
हम कैसे समाज में रहते हैं जहाँ पर इंसान को अपना ही जीवन जीने की आज़ादी नहीं है?
Women being raped and children being killed, and how insensitive our society has become.
People are not wrong. What is wrong is their religion. What is wrong is their social ideology.
Now the point is, do we want to sustain institutions in which equality and liberty cannot be sustained?
एक समय था जब गरीबी से लड़ने की जरूरत थी, अब वो समय आया है जब सांप्रदायिकता से लड़ने की जरूरत है।
Struggle against communalism can be properly waged by young people like you if you constantly interact with people around you.
People are having so much of myths regarding Muslim community.
हमारे खेलों तक पे असर देखने को मिलता है।
अपने निजी स्वार्थों के लिए, निजी लाभ के लिए वो पूरे शहर का, पूरे समाज का माहौल बिल्कुल खराब कर देता है।
I refuse to believe that a majority of our media is spreading hate or prejudice.
आपस में इस तरह की चीजें चलती रहे, समाज बटा रहे, उनको रोटियां सेकने का जो मौका मिलता रहे।
Generally, the people who perpetuate these crimes, they get away without getting any punishment.
Suppose such a carnage breaks out around you, what are you going to do?
Don't forget Afghanistan, don't forget Taliban, don't forget that these are the consequences of great internal strife produced by the same factors at work in our part of the world. Don't forget that.
Fascism in India will not come in the form in which it has come in Europe. Fascism in India will come in the form of communism.
Even if not in the short run, I'm quite optimistic in the long run it will be defeated. It has to be defeated because it cannot survive. Because history has not been shaped like this. And history will come to the rescue of the future of a great nation like India.
Let's start by asking ourselves this question: is the media communalized? My answer really is, in the main part, no. It would be easy to say in the main part yes, because that's what perhaps you would like to believe. I believe that in the main part, no. The exception is that the media is communalized, not the rule. 2 reasons, or three or four reasons really for this. Essentially, I think first we need to achieve some kind of consensus on what is communal and what is communalization. Is religion shown on television through, let's say, a Navratri festival or Ganesh Chaturthi festival or Urs a sign of a media which is becoming communal? Increasingly, there is a section which believes that there are people who write in saying you're showing too much of religion on television. Bottom line is, I think, about religion. This belief that whenever you show religion in any form, it necessarily is communal. I think this is a weakness in the system, that this is a vision of secularism and communalism which essentially believes that religion has no space in our society. My belief is that communalization essentially stems from hate and prejudice. When you deliberately or otherwise spread hate or prejudice, then you can say that the media is spreading communalism. Now, in the main part, across the country, I refuse to believe that a majority of our media is spreading hate or prejudice. In Gujarat, by and large, if you took the two major newspapers which unfortunately played an extremely regrettable role in those days, Sandesh and Gujarat Samachar, by and large, even some of the smaller papers whose role has gone unnoticed, like Gujarat Mitra in Surat, played an extremely positive role. They did not fall for state propaganda, despite the fact that they were under great pressure. It's very easy to be an English language journalist in Delhi and be critical of Narendra Modi. It's that much more difficult to be a Gujarati speaking journalist living, working in Gujarat, in a place like Ahmedabad or Vadodara, and still being critical of the Modi government. And there are any number of good young journalists who took an extremely strong anti-Modi line. We have to start differentiate. We cannot make generalizations to suggest the Gujarati media got communalized. Sections of the Gujarati media certainly played their own role in spreading hate and prejudice, largely because I think somewhere down the line, and this is particularly true of Gujarat Samachar, which is a paper which believes that it's mirroring society, much like Navakar in Maharashtra. Papers whose editorial policy is often dictated by what they believe is the popular sentiment. What has actually happened in the media? There are 3 or 4 changes that have taken place. One is, I believe that the media itself has increasingly finds itself, the gap between those in power and the media has shrunk. Effectively, the media, instead of playing that adversarial role, has chosen not to. And this is across the spectrum. This is not just restricted to regional media. It's not just restricted to issues of communalism. Generally, the media today, in large parts, does not play the kind of adversarial role that it should, the kind of hard questioning that it should. Number 2, what has happened is the state has recognized this. And perhaps the state recognized it before the media recognized it, that it can actually either intimidate the media or seduce the media. So you have, across the spectrum in several states, governments which, for a small district newspaper, decide that they will not give ads to that paper if that paper writes anything critical. So they can control essentially the money flow into that newspaper. That's one way of intimidating the media. It doesn't always have to be by bashing up the camera person. Those are the obvious manifestations of an intolerant state. But I think there are many other manifestations which are often not seen, hidden manifestations, like just denying government ads to a particular newspaper. It happens all the time across the country. If you don't intimidate, then you seduce. Seduction takes place in various forms. Increasingly, you have more and more media persons who are appointed on various committees. They become chairmen of various commissions. You hear of editors who are part of some Indo-French joint working group. They are part of Sino-Indian joint working groups. That's a process of seduction that's taking place. Some of them become MPs, others are given various benefits from the system. That process is taking place, and that process is extremely dangerous. That process then means that when, say, an incident like Gujarat happens, or there is a major conflagration, you're unable to actually take a stand which is seen to be a positive secular stand. Today you have newspapers, the Pioneer being a classic example of it, which have actually been seduced by those in power. Their editor-in-chief becomes a Rajya Sabha MP. Their journalists are told that, if Advani coughs, the Pioneer must catch influenza. So, you must have 6-column leads every time Advani so much as moves. The other change that has taken place is that there were certain politicians who were largely seen as people who did not need to get the kind of coverage that they did. They were generally targeted, or they were isolated, because it was recognized that the kind of politics they practiced was not good for society. Today, those same politicians, whether it's a Praveen Togadia or any fundamentalist leader, has actually found that the more you shriek and the more you scream, you actually get space. Because television in particular, and this is a danger that has been sensed in America as well, that when you reach a soundbite society where the more provocative you are and the more aggressive you are, the more likely you are to be called on programs like Big Fight. If you're actually a rational, reasonable guy who speaks the language of reason and good sense, people don't generally call you. So you've actually created space which never existed 10, 15 years ago. It's a fact of life. It's a fact that we are slowly having to come to terms with. To give you an example, Praveen Togadia decides to hold a press conference. You have 6, 7 channels, 3 or 4 decide to cover it live. Now if 3 or 4 decide to cover it live, the temptation then is on the others also that are we being left behind, let's also cover it live. Unfortunately, there used to be a certain consensus 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, which is broken down as to how do you cover these events, how do you cover these politicians. Most of these elements thrive largely on propaganda and disinformation. Now, you don't censor them. Censoring is, in today's day and age with so many different channels and so many different newspapers, it's impossible to censor. You can't tell me don't show Praveen Togadia at all, don't have him at all. No, he has space. The question you can then debate is how much space you give him and whether you cover him live. I think those are legitimate questions to ask. But you can't censor him. What you've got to actually do is, I believe, counter him with hard information. Now, you cannot capture him with your own propaganda unless that propaganda is based on hard and accurate information. It happened in Gujarat. Various people at various times, I mean, there was indignation, so you wrote in a particular way, but you made mistakes at times, and you made factual mistakes. And those factual mistakes were caught out by Narendra Modi, and for 6 months he was preying on those factual mistakes. You cannot make factual mistakes if you want to counter those who use the media for common ends. You've actually got to counter their disinformation with your own hard, accurate information. For example, every time they say or try and propagate in their speeches that Muslims breed much faster than Hindus, they have a much larger population, you've got to have the figures ready on your hand to actually counter them with hard information. There are very few answers to that. If they say tomorrow that the jihadi terrorists are attacking Kashmiri Pandits and you do nothing about it, you've got to make the point that 95% of those or 98% of those who've died in Kashmir are Muslims. The worst thing you can do otherwise is get into some kind of a tutu meh with them. The best thing that you can do is just provide hard, cold facts. The problem with the media is that the media is also getting into polemical arguments, gets into deep polemical arguments. Today you have senior editors of various newspapers who try and rationalize Hindutva politics. And you have others on the other side who try and sort of debunk Hindutva, but by using cliches. You can't do it through cliches anymore. The problem is that you do not have any attempt being made to capture that all-important middle ground, that voice of sanity. Somewhere down the line, you've got to, I think within the media there is a need, an urgent need, to first decide to form some kind of consensus from within. Something which we haven't done. That A, B, C, these are essential elements of what we believe the media should represent. That any form of violence is objectionable. Whether that violence takes place in any part of the country, we are not going to rationalize it by sort of seeking recourse in history. We will not be apologetic about that. No one says that one has to be apologetic about one's attempt to ensure that there is an element of communal amity in society, that there is strong communal amity. I remember straight after Godhra, the senior editor of Hindustan Times wrote a piece that the reason why the backlash to Godhra took place was because the secularists were silent, when actually they were not. There is a problem of terrorism that exists in the country, a terrorism which has links from across the border, a terrorism which today feeds in several parts of this country on local populations. We've got to learn to recognize that. You've got to learn that that makes the challenge even more difficult, because it makes it easier to use that as a propaganda weapon, to suggest to tar an entire community. Now, how do you counter that? You counter that through hard facts and figures. For example, in Bombay, who was killed in those blasts in Javeri Bazaar? Hindus and Muslims, both innocent on both sides, died. If the media tomorrow had given a full list of that in that Javeri Bazaar blast, you would know that the fact was that the person who's died is an innocent Indian. Now you've got to somewhere down the line sort of push, and really the reader and the viewer has to push the media towards doing that. Because there are channels today and there are papers, as I said, like Gujarat Samachar, which believe that this is the popular mood. We've got to reflect that popular mood. But yes, there is a need to rethink the way you are going to combat through the media the politics of hate and prejudice. And I think it's important that when papers go out of line, that we actually have some kind of forum to actually hold them accountable. The newspapers that went out of line during Ayodhya, nothing really happened to them. The Jagrans and all got away with it then, and probably the Sandeshas will get away with it now. Now, unfortunately, there is no concept of media accountability. The big problem within the media is that there is absolutely no introspection amongst ourselves. We simply do not introspect enough amongst us. We'll call for judicial accountability, we'll call for political accountability, we'll call for corporate accountability, but we don't call for media accountability. So when there were reports, for example, that guns were stored in a particular mosque, and I remember in Surat in '92, this entire report was spread that women had been raped, and there was a video cassette for months on end. Nobody's ever seen that video cassette then or now. But those who spread this disinformation were never actually questioned. They were never interrogated from within the media. That, I think, is a bigger problem. It doesn't mean the entire media is communal. But I believe that the larger problem today exists in the way society deals with these issues. Is society ready to stand up and be counted at times like this? Or is society, or is a section of the media only catering to the baser prejudices of society, and society itself has those prejudices, as we've seen in Gujarat, where papers like Gujarat Samachar and others actually believed, and for a while perhaps were right, reflected the baser prejudices of society. So who initiates the process? Does the media initiate the process of reform, or does society initiate that process? Does society begin the process of actually pushing the media to staying away from these kind of fascist fundamental forces on either side? I believe it has to be a two-way process. It cannot be a one-dimensional process. It cannot be the media targeted. The media was, Narendra Modi can say that the Gujarat riots occurred because the media showed pictures of shops burning. Nor can it be us merely blaming the people of a state and saying that they were responsible, they were out on the streets. A, not every person in the state was out on the street. B, not every person in the media was projecting a one-sided view of these riots. So I think it requires some kind of a dialogue. It maybe even requires at some stage to have a dialogue between not just the converted, but between those who are confused. Because I believe this middle ground today is largely confused in this country. It's not sure. It stands on weak ground because a certain consensus which was built over 40 years broke down at some stage in the 80s. And I believe we haven't been since then been able to actually come back to achieving that consensus.
इन काली सदियों के सर से जब रात का आंचल ढलकेगा,
जब दुख के बादल पिघलेंगे, जब सुख का सागर छलकेगा, जब अंबर झूम के नाचेगा, जब धरती नगमे गाएगी, वो सुबह कभी